Tom, we start out every episode with the story straight from our guest's mouth. So start from the beginning. Take us through what your journey has been like from studying chemical engineering at MIT to Select Tech, and what sparked your interest in developing products from recycled materials.
Yeah, sure. So I'll go back a little bit, but I grew up the son of a plumber and always liked working with my hands. And chemical engineering is actually glorified plumbing, believe it or not. Yeah, no, it's
Really?
it's it's,
Okay.
it's all the same concepts, moving materials and heat from one place to another. So it was right up my alley. I went into chemical engineering. Fortunate enough to get into MIT. Probably couldn't today. The competition has gotten a lot more stringent, but I was okay back then. And I loved it. I enjoyed studying chemical engineering at the time, got my master's degree, uh, ended up doing some work in environmental consulting for a while. So I've always had a passion to combine the environment with what my technical knowledge was. I can remember, again, getting back to the plumbing days, my dad made a homemade solar collector on the back of the house out of stuff. I mean,
Wow.
and this was before they existed. So I don't know how well it worked, but he was out there doing the same thing. That's probably where I get it from. And so I always had a passion for the environment, doing something with my knowledge, and I did consulting for a while. At some point, I decided I needed to get my business degree, so I went back to business school, did those 2 years, and figured I would go to work for a big chemical company in the business group. And I
Sure.
did for a couple of years. And then due to a situation with my wife, we had to move. We had to move back to Boston, which wasn't tough to accept. But I also had to find a new job. So
Sure.
off we went. And I ended up landing with this startup medical waste company that was trying to recycle materials for medical waste. And it sounds crazy. It probably
Yeah.
was crazy. But of course, I see that job description and I'm like, yeah, sign me up, right? So I joined, and I was a business analyst. That was what I applied for and was hired for. But eventually, I had to help build the factory where we actually were able to extract some plastics from medical waste.
Wow.
It was a pretty interesting process. I learned a ton from it, not just about that process, but the industry. I got to know a lot of people in plastics recycling. Really good, mentors, allies along the way. And I'll never forget that the medical waste company didn't seem like it was going to make it. So I decided, you know what, I'll start a company. I love this. And I reached out to some of these people that I had met, and they were like, oh, that's the best news I've ever heard. You want to start a company? I'm like, what? I don't know what I'm doing. It's okay. We'll help you. So, it was a great lesson, and that got me started at Select Tech. And our mission was really to sort of continuing on with this idea of finding plastics that were hard to handle, one way or the other. Medical waste being one challenge, but there are others, and then finding a way to make products out of those, almost as like a matchmaker. And so that was the birth of Select Tech. We developed a number of different products, just kind of getting to know materials, what was their inherent value. One example, early product for us was we made a planter that looked exactly like a red clay planter, except it was
Really?
indestructible. And so the first, again, it's a matchmaker, right? So we knew of pallet wrapping being a very difficult material to recycle, but it's inherently very durable and fairly processable through
Yeah.
plastics processing. So challenges are it's contaminated with dirt. Contamination is not, it's not a nasty word in this case. It just has dirt in it. It's hard to get it out. A conventional reuser of that material would want it pristine, and it's not ever going to be.
Okay.
But the dirt actually enhanced the appearance of the clay look. So that was kind of how we approached things. We looked at, well, what's in it that makes it tough to reuse, and can that item add value in some way? And in this case, it was perfect, right? So we just added some red color, terracotta coloring, and it made a very good looking product. It's like, I still see them, and they've got to be 25 plus years old. I still see them all over the country.
No kidding.
Oh yeah, I've seen them. You can't even imagine where I've seen them. Hotels, amusement parks.
Wow.
And I can tell by our specific, we made the shape of it just a little bit different, and I can spot it from a mile away just because I'm sick like that. But so again, that was our philosophy, and we were constantly looking for these, again, these problems that could become value, and then thinking about what could they be made into, and we invented a number of products, and along the way, a DuPont business heard about us, and they had a carpet waste that they were trying to get rid of. I think they had 1 million pounds in storage. They were in a lot of ways like us. They were committed to dealing with it. So they were like, well, we'll figure it out some way. We'll find an answer. In the meantime, we're going to store it. We're not going to landfill it. I'm like, that was pretty noble. So this guy who was an ex-Green Beret, the DuPont fellow who was our chief allied liaison, whatever, he was just relentless. There was no saying no. And so he was a great ally, right? You meet a person like that, whether you wanted to or not, you were going to be successful. And so we originally looked at that material and said, well, we can put it into this lane divider system that we're making. And he's like, no, it's got to be a flooring product. I'm like, well, all right, a little bit more challenging. We'll figure it out. And so we went down the path of looking at options, and we created our interlocking systems with this DuPont business.
That's awesome.
So I think that carries you through from beginning to sort of middle.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've accomplished a lot in your career. What were some you mentioned your dad being an influence, right? And his solar collector that he built on the back porch there. How did that early stages of your life influence your career, do you think, to this point?
Yeah, I mean, there's, I call it the DIY sickness. In some ways, it's not a skill. I don't know. I always want to do it myself. Just try it, figure it out. And it's my first inclination, whereas some people's first inclination is to call somebody
Sure.
who's got some experience.
Yeah.
But I've always, wanted to learn how things worked. And it was that, like, working with my dad, maybe it's different nowadays with the different technologies, but in plumbing, it was, every day was different. And there was always an issue, right? So getting the pipe from here to there, getting the heat to turn on. And you just figured it out. There was never, you never had this notion of this isn't doable, ever. And again, that's a sickness. You become relentlessly dogged, and sometimes you need to give up. And I don't understand that concept. And again, that's not necessarily a good thing, right? I am definitely on the side of the spectrum that sticks with things too long. I just do. Okay. And sometimes that works out. So, plastics recycling has not been sort of the most robust business to be in. There are a lot of people that would have looked at even to the success we've had. It hasn't been like, oh my gosh, like you might have success in, say, IT or AI or nowadays, right? So I just don't, I just stick with it. I make it work. It's just the way I am.
Yeah, got it. So we're talking on the Manufacturing Culture podcast. So Tom, what does culture mean to you? Culture can mean a lot of things to different people. So how do you define company culture, and what do you do to foster a positive and engaging environment for the employees and the folks at Select Tech?
Yeah, you talk about positive culture. I've always believed in this idea that, you can do anything. Whether that's really true or not is another story. But, there's almost like no problem that's insurmountable at some level, right? And then when you're dealing with business, it's like you really aren't any problems that are insurmountable. Because it's all little stuff, really. And you get thrown challenges, you get whatever it might be. And I never panic. I really don't. It was funny. This is a little bit of a side story, but I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and I was scheduled to speak, and I had it wrong in my calendar. I thought
Oh
I
no.
was speaking the following day. So I was like, it was the day before, I thought, and thought I had a couple hours. I'm going up to my hotel room. I'm going to take a nap, right? I'm 61 years old. I take naps, right? So I get my phone goes off, and it's a friend from the conference. He's like, "Where are you, dude?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" Like, you're up. And
No.
I can specifically, this is like one of a weird thing to me, but I can specifically recall in my head saying, "You're not going to panic. You have to go right now. No panic." I was like,
Yep.
because even that would have normally caused me to panic. And I can, like, it was a voice in my head saying, panic is not an option. Put
Yeah.
on your shirt, get down to that conference room and deliver that speech. And it went off great. So it's kind of what I bring to it. And I try to, getting back to your question, I just try to be that person in the room that doesn't panic. And people comment on it. And I know when, like, if I'm traveling, it's weird. And I guess I haven't done a great job of imparting it, because when I'm not around, there's a little bit more panic. But I know when I am around,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I guess at some point I would panic, but most things, I mean, it's like you always, someone once said, you always have your plan B. And see, I don't have a plan B, but I know there's one there. Something comes at you and you think, all right, there's a solution to this somewhere out there. I just have to think about it. And there's probably a couple different options, and then we'll figure out which one might help. And then we'll go down that path and see where it goes from there.